Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Human in the Hard Drive. Today, I'm going to be asking these two gentlemen some questions regarding career transitions. I think it'll be helpful for people to hear what goes into a big decision, like moving on from a company or a complete career change. We are also doing this topic for my own personal gain because I am going to be looking for another job. This is obviously not something that I have experienced. However, both of you have experienced changing jobs, roles, and careers. I think for me in our audience, it might be interesting to get some perspective and guidance about your mindsets when you decided to move in a different direction. I know for me, I have lots of questions, lots of fears, and excitement about the changes coming for me in my career. So let's just jump right into some questions, unless you guys have something to say about it.
Let's
No,
get
I'm
to the
here for
questions.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So, what motivated you to transition from your previous roles into either what you're doing now or whenever you decided to make the change? For example, was it just boredom? Was it job satisfaction? Was it money or something that I don't have listed?
Jim, you want to go first or should I start?
Go ahead, Jay. You can start.
Yeah, okay. So for me, I've basically done this twice, right? So I mentioned in earlier episodes that I was working for your company, Brian, and I really worried at the time that I was going to get stuck in a place where my skill level or all the skills that I knew were going to be tied to the company that I was working for because everything there's really not much that you can take with you elsewhere. So after working there for 3 years, I decided that I need skills that are universal as opposed to skills that are very specific for a select company. So that's the reason I decided to move in the first place. And then I worked for a bunch of companies, maybe for 5 or so years. And the amount of money I was making was pretty unsatisfactory, as well as the work that I was doing. So changing careers the second time, for me at least, was both money and what I actually with like the type of work that I was actually doing. So I wanted to be doing something more like a lot more technical, a lot less like restart your PC sort of thing, like that everybody gets when they're working in tech support. I wanted to be doing something that had a lot more weight to it and also paid a lot better.
Yeah, for me, so my first kind of transition, I've only had a couple of jobs in my that I consider my career jobs. I started a non-technical role in operations, and I was highly motivated to get a technical role because I was learning coding and I was very excited about the prospect of being a developer. I know in the past I talked about like the lifestyle stuff, but it was more than that. I really liked the work and the idea of the work, and I like the idea of using my brain and solving problems in that way. And also the empowerment that comes with being able to build apps because I always like the idea of being able to build my own products and build my own kind of like ecosystem of products. And I thought that was a really cool career path. So my first transition was from a non-technical role to a developer role. I actually did take a slight pay cut to do that transition. And at the time, I remember being very torn about it. Like I actually had some kind of negotiation calls with the owners of the new company I was going to, and I did a terrible job negotiating. They basically like, "Hey, this is it, take it or leave it." And I eventually was like, "Okay, I'll take it." No, actually, no, not that's not true. They allowed me to work. It was a salary position, but they gave me a bonus number of hours. So I was working more than a 40-hour week to actually earn a little bit more. So that's actually not fair. They actually allowed me to earn a little bit of more money. It was still a pay cut, even with the longer hours. But in my mind, I was thinking, okay, this is what I want to do anyways. I'm more interested in getting the experience. And then even if this doesn't pan out and this company's not great, then I'll have some experience. I can go somewhere else and earn a lot more money than I'm earning on this current trajectory in operations. Um, I'm really glad I made that decision. It was like one of the best decisions I made. I quickly had a much better career path at the new company. I also aligned a lot better with just like the team, the management, what we are doing, the mission of the organization, the day-to-day operations. So even though like eventually I think I earned a lot more in that position than if I stayed in my current position because raises were like 10% plus per year because they knew they started below like market average. So the money ended up working out fine, but also even if it didn't, like it just was so worth it in so many ways that I would have taken a pay cut and been so much happier there. I would say easily double as happy as I was in the previous position. So I think sometimes everyone thinks every job is going to be a job and like it's terrible everywhere, but there are better and worse places to work. There are places that align better with you and places that align less well with you. So definitely go look for a good fit. Jay, I feel like you've had experience like that too. Like some places you probably have loved and some places you maybe didn't like so much. I don't know. Have you had that experience too?
Yeah, for sure. We could talk about my whole career or we could just talk about cloud. But like, for example, I mentioned, I think in the previous podcast that I think this last company that I worked for, which unfortunately was just a 6-month contract role, probably the best environment that I've really been a part of. So the two people that interviewed me, one was the head of project managers and the other one was the head solutions architect at the company. And yeah, the interview process was super quick. I was on an interview for a half hour. That was it. They sent feedback to the recruiter. We want to hire this guy. They didn't ask for any references whatsoever. Hired me. I started within 3 days of them doing the initial interview with me. And then just the work environment that was there was exactly what I would want. Like, give me a ton of responsibility and a ton of support if I need it. You know what I mean? So give me all the rope to hang myself with, so it's the sort of thing. And yeah, I've worked for real crap companies over here in Australia and also some really good ones.
Oh, a couple of questions based off of your guys' responses. So going with what you just said, Jason, could you tell in the interview process that you were aligning, or was that after you had already started?
Yeah, that's a good question because the interview was really interesting, right? So the solutions architect that was on the call, like this is probably one of the most ridiculous situations I've ever been in with in an interview, but like the guy was literally just shoveling spaghetti into his mouth, like
Will Smith style.
on this Teams call, right? And I was just like, what the fuck is this guy like what is this? You know what I mean? It felt so unprofessional and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, he was probably the best person that I've ever had to interact with over here in Australia as like my manager. Like, he's like, hey, I have this project that I need you to work on. It sounds really stupid, but we need someone to do it. So I don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. I'm going to get you to do it. If you need help, like, let me know and I'll do everything that I can to help you out with it, sort of thing. And that to me is really what I want in a manager, like be able to talk to me honestly and really be able to offer your help and not just say that you'll be there, because he demonstrated time and time again, like hands down the best manager I've had over here in Australia. Yeah.
I wonder if that's his thing. Every interview, he's got to have a bowl of spaghetti.
Yeah, he just wants to get people-
Yeah.
It's like one of those like, Google
I think they were honestly busy enough. And like, once I joined, I had access to his like calendar on like Outlook and stuff like that. He's literally like in meetings 7 hours of the day. So like he's got no time to take a break for lunch. So he's just like, oh, we have an interview with this person I've never met before. I'm going to fucking eat spaghetti. Like, while I'm interviewing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care. It's fine.
Yeah.
And
That'd be
So
awesome to be the spaghetti guy though. Like literally eat spaghetti in every interview. Like be that guy at the company.
yeah,
For you, whenever you said you took a pay cut,
Yeah.
that was in the beginning of your career.
Yes.
Do you feel I know everybody, each of us are in different parts in our lives, but in your current part or where you are in life now, would you take a pay cut to make a career transition now? Or is that just too hard right now for you?
That's a good question. So I've never pursued money. Okay, that's not true. I like money. I want to earn as much money as possible, but like my career choices have never been maximizing money per se. And I think I've done okay over the course of, I'm pretty happy with where things have landed. I think there are people who earn a lot more and there's people who earn a lot less. I'm okay overall. I've had, especially running a business, up and down years. So overall, I'm okay with where I'm at. For me, it's more, if I was to look for a job again, there's like a short list of companies that I would want to work for that I know from being in like the tech industry because they do things that I find interesting. and there's like specific technologies and ways that those technologies are being applied to problems. I care so much more about solving interesting things and getting away from crufty BS bureaucracy. So again, Jay, I don't know if your experience was this, but company size has a big play in my happiness. So small companies, they let you wear a lot of hats per se. You get your hands on all sorts of different things. It's basically we have more than we can carry. Can like put whatever you can on your back and let's go up the hill, right? So I like company structures like that. I like to be able to do things without a lot of red tape and just like try our best to like get things done. And I get really annoyed with bureaucracy. So I hate large. I wouldn't like working at a large company probably personally. I don't think I would enjoy that. So yeah, for me, I don't know. I guess I would take. It's hard for me to see anything besides like working on our own. Now that I've been doing this company for 8 years, it's hard for me to imagine getting a job. Although it's definitely not out of the cards at any point. But I don't know. I don't know. My money's all over the place. I don't even know what a pay cut would be. Right? It's like okay,
Mhm.
a pay cut from what, like 2019 or a pay cut from 2023. Those numbers are very different, right? So I don't really think in terms of like, oh, it's $10,000 more, $10,000. Like I get those swings, like way bigger swings than that in a year. So I don't know. I don't think I would care so much about that. Although I'd want to make, I guess if I was, I'd feel somewhat like I was compromising, I guess, in a certain way. So I'd probably
You,
want to make a certain baseline if I
yeah,
was going to do that.
right. So I know you at one point were working for a city would, and you, I think you said previously that you took a financial hit from not doing that anymore. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, do you want me to explain that?
Well, no, I more mean like if that was happening today, you would still do that. Is if you were doing that right now and you
Yep.
wanted to get out, you would still do that?
Well, everything's an opportunity. So for me, it's an opportunity cost, right? Like, what are you giving up by the thing you're doing currently? And if you feel like you're giving up something, it might not be financial, but okay, start it like, for instance, if you want to start a product, right? You're probably going to lose money for 3 years or more or whatever, but eventually there might be a long tail where it makes a lot of money. So right now it seems very expensive to leave a high paying gig to do something like that. But in the long term, it might actually be better off to do that, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know, like so I was working a consulting gig that was pretty full time, and I was running a business on this on top of that. So I was getting about half my. So I started. Okay, I got that gig to do like a 20-hour project, right? And it was very handshaky, like Jason said. Actually, good gigs like that sometimes are just like someone's like, "Hey, do you know how to do this?" Like, "Yeah, I can do this." And it's like, "Okay, sounds good," and then like try to do it, right? So I did like a 20-hour project or something like that, and then they liked the work, and I slowly got integrated more and more into the city, and then eventually I was like the only like the guy the head engineer left, and I became as a consultant I was their only engineer on their whole like digital team there. So I was running all this stuff, and I got pulled into like almost a full time role, even though I was just supposed to be consulting. And eventually, it got so intense that I was moving off some of my client work and moving more towards the city work. And so I got to the point where I was about half and half of my money was coming from the work I was doing full time at that city, and the other half was coming from all my client work. So I was like split. I was basically 50-50 at that point, which was not really what I wanted to be. I always wanted to have more client work than have just like one giant gig making up half my revenue. But it's weird. Like when I left, it was like, okay, boom, like right overnight, there's like half revenue is basically gone. And then I slowly we built back up to probably similar levels or not quite as high, but like supplemented it with more project work. So it's just a shifting of priorities at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I think if I was
Sure.
on a straight like job career path, it would feel different. Like you'd be like, oh, I can't take like like my year by year swings like tens of thousands of dollars. It's not. It's like doesn't really mean anything to like. I don't really care that much. It's just like I want to earn more, but like I wouldn't necessarily like think of it that way. Short term gains over long term gains.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. There's, I don't know. So basically, job satisfaction is your biggest thing, Jim, because you're saying that do what makes you happy compared to the financial gains, and hopefully the financial gains come after that.
Yeah, and the one caveat I would say is that makes more sense early in your career. I'd say as you're more senior, it's like you're not like okay, when you're building your skills, do whatever you can to build your skills, become valuable and figure out what you like to do, right? That's the most important thing. Because you have more time than you have money, but eventually as you get older, you probably have more money than you have time. And at some point like I don't know, there is a base threshold that I would have to make like
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
mind
Of
before I
course.
take a career, right? So I'm willing to make a lot less owning my business than I am if I was working for somebody. I just like, I've had a couple of lean years where like, I would never work a job for that. I would quit the job and I would look for a better job. So, so yeah, I definitely have standards. Don't get me wrong. There's just a number that I probably wouldn't go below to take a job. But yeah, for me, I guess as long as you can meet that general standard, what's another 10, 15K? Like, I don't know. It doesn't mean that much to me, especially when they take it all in taxes anyway. So yeah.
And same with you, Jay. You actively chose to change your career because you weren't getting the satisfaction out of what you were doing previously, or you were concerned about your career path.
Yeah. Ironically enough, though, changing careers has been more lucrative to me both times. So
Yeah.
when I left your company, I think I was on 42,000 a year or something like that, or $44,000 a year, and then switched careers, and all of a sudden I was making 56. And then before I left Boston, I made it to about 75, then moved over here, was making basically the same amount, only in Australian dollars instead of US dollars. And that was basically my salary for the next 2 or 3 years, and then transitioned to cloud and blew up again. So yeah, for me, it hasn't really been about money. It's been about job satisfaction. And I've, like Jim mentioned, I've left jobs just to make less money, but to be more happy. So an example of that is my second job over here in Australia. I was making $80,000 a year. And then I was there for 2 months. I hated every second that I was at that place. And I found a place to interview it with. It was basically the same type of business, NSP, user support, infrastructure support, that sort of thing. They offered me 70, and I took the $10,000 decrease because I was so unhappy based off of the first 2 months that I was working at the other company. So yeah, to me, it's way more about job satisfaction than it is about money. Money is obviously an important part of it, but yeah, it's ultimately, I cannot tell you how many times I've woken up and just laid in bed talking to myself about how I would rather do anything in the world than get up and go to work today. Like, you have to really coach yourself into being like, hey, you can do this, get up and go to work. But that's not something that you want to be saying to yourself every day. You know what I mean? You don't want to be like, okay, you can do this, blah, blah, blah. Like, you shouldn't have to have that conversation with yourself. And if you get to that point, job, you need to be looking elsewhere because it's just not good for you, and it's not good for your employer. If you're like, in that 2.5 months that I was working for that company, I think I called out sick like 4 or 5 times because I was like, I can't do it.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah. So I have a lot of job satisfaction currently. So I'm struggling with the idea of moving because I don't want to move. I'm not getting forced out or anything like that, but it's just not it's my family situation, and what's going to be changing at my current position is just not going to work for me. So that's one of my struggles. And I'm sure other people out there are going through it as well, where you have to change positions just because it's good for your current life situation. So hopefully I can find the same job satisfaction elsewhere as I currently have.
Well,
But go ahead.
one of the things that I would say is, like, you've just a little piece of advice from someone who's changed jobs. Like, I changed clothes to someone who has changed jobs. So
Mhm.
like, if the first job that you get after your current one doesn't seem to align with what you were hoping, don't be afraid to leave again. Because like,
Mhm.
I see a lot of people on LinkedIn and other different websites that have Reds and stuff like that, talking about how like, you can't be leaving too often. Well, I wholly disagree with that. If you have a valid reason to leave and you can communicate that to the next person that you're interviewing with and let them know that, like, there is a very, like, valid reason for you deciding, like, yeah, I know I've been here for 3 months, but this is why it sucks and this is why I hate it. Then, like, don't settle for something just because you've been at one place for 14 years and you get another role and it just doesn't seem right. Don't be like, oh, well, I need to wait this out for a couple of years and see where it
Yeah.
goes. It's like, no, you can make a choice to leave right now and it's fine.
I 100% agree with you, Lum. I'm a big believer that resume building is overrated. So people have this like, I need to tell a story with my resume. And
Mhm.
maybe to a certain extent, but you really don't need to do that. Like, you don't need to stick out somewhere for 2 years that you hate. Like, it just doesn't. Also, like, do you want to know what like employers want to see? Like, take a genuine interest in their company. Like, if they haven't, okay, if you want to get hired, first of all, like the best technique, and I'm not like a great interviewer by any means, but the things that work for me is have like a list of targeted questions about the business and how like you've noticed things about it and you're curious about how the workings are and like how you could possibly get in and make it better and suggestions if like, oh, have you tried this or those kind of things. Like if you can do that's like huge and employers will love you and they'll want to hire you. Also like targeted cover letters, those type of things, like being very specific to the jobs you're looking for and not just blasting is huge. And the biggest thing, if you really want to get hired, if they have any kind of open source like products or things that they are releasing out in the world, use them and create a PR or multiple PRs to their project about how to make it better. And I guarantee you they will be trying to hire you. There's no way that they won't come knocking down your door to try to hire you. Like if you can do that, which is a lot of work. And I guess I know, especially for junior people, that's probably out of the realm of possibility because these projects are oftentimes complex and they're hard to figure out how to like orient yourself around and like do it. But if you could successfully do that, my God, you'd be hired so fast. I don't think you have to write a resume, and you could probably set your price too, because most people they hire are apathetic. They don't know if they're even going to get them to show up to work. They don't know if like there's all these issues with them. If you just show that you're enthusiastic and you care, you get the job. I guarantee it. I would put money on that.
Okay. All right. All very good advice. I will take that to my next interview.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see where I am on my questions. All right. Let's try this one. When you guys mentally made the decision to say, all right, I need to change, what were the steps you took to prepare yourself for the transition? If it was at home life or if it was technical skills, if it was, you tell me.
Yeah. So I suppose my first career transition, I did absolutely nothing to prepare, but I'd only been in the workforce for about 3.5 years. So there really wasn't much for me to do. I was getting hired at another entry level role. My boss just tested me on basic like troubleshooting steps. You know what I mean? Like, say the customer called and his monitor isn't working. Like, what would you do to troubleshoot? I'm like, oh, check the power
Smash it.
cord. Yeah, yeah. Right, exactly. Transitioning from IT to cloud though, that I needed a cert for. And once I got my first certificate, I started just trying to work on projects that were what I would have considered like abnormal for somebody starting out in cloud. So what I would do is I would go through with these projects, create documentation, and then actually post about them on LinkedIn, which is so cringy to me, but like it's something that you have to do to be seen by recruiters because LinkedIn is honestly, unfortunately, the best way to get hired today. But yeah, I would create documentation, like show all of the stuff that I was doing, like with these projects. And like it was within a month of getting my first cert in AWS, which was the cloud practitioner cert, which to be honest isn't even technical. It's just basically like knowing what these services do. I got an interview with a big four company. So you've heard of a lot of these, probably Deloitte, PwC, EY. I don't remember what the other one was, but yeah, anyway, got an interview with them. The recruiter that contacted me, I was basically like, are you sure that like they'll accept like me as a candidate? Because like I've never actually like done any of this professionally. Um, so during the interview process, I just basically talked about the fact that I had a cert. I had 7 years experience in IT and I have worked on these projects and I like explained how I did them and stuff like that. And they decide to hire me, albeit at a way lower rate than a cloud engineer should be hired for. But having no skills, no professional skills in cloud engineering, I really didn't care. I saw it as an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's wherever I go to, it's going to be somewhat similar in the sense that I am going to be doing something, or well, at least language wise, just because I've been working in the same language that is solely proprietary to my company. So yeah, I'll have to at least take some classes on my own in my spare time. Like you said, brush up on different aspects, which is a good tool for everybody that's listening to do. Is if you're going to change, you would recommend your second avenue compared to your first avenue in career changes, is what I'm saying. Don't just go into a career change not doing anything to prepare, or
Yeah,
do more of what you did the second time.
you need to see what it is that you actually want to do, how your skills actually transfer over, and then what you need to learn to be able to apply the skills that you have to the new thing that you're moving to. So that's the key, in my opinion, if you're really looking to move career paths, is being able to leverage the skills that you have and understanding what it is that you need to know in order to be able to get to where it is that you want to be.
Nice. Okay. What about you, Jim?
Yeah. So to answer your original question about like preparedness, my first transition, I felt like I was working tremendously hard to make that transition because I was really not technical at all. I think I mentioned on previous podcasts, I never really was that into computers growing up. So like my first job out of college, I had a tenuous grasp on email. And I'm not talking like email servers or how to set up. I'm talking about like how to use it. Like I wasn't sure like when it like I sent it, like where did it go? And like, is it in their inbox? Yeah, I was very confused. Also, another funny thing is I had heard that like I'm a weird guy. Like honestly, like my first like week sitting in an office was one of the most torturous weeks of my life, to be honest. You hear all these people crying on TikTok about it now, and everyone makes fun of them. I'm like, no, I get it. Like it's awful if you're coming from college. But anyways, I heard that like being ambidextrous was cool, so I was like using. I'm right-handed, but I was using a right-handed mouse with my left hand. And like the guys there were like, "Oh, you're left-handed. We could get you a left-handed mouse." I'm like, "No, I'm not left-handed." And they're just like, "What?" Because I was using my left hand. And they're like, they were like, I guess like I'm friends with all those guys now, but I guess they would talk behind my back. They're like, "I think this guy's like really slow or like off." So, anyways, I was like I think I mentioned before, I was studying after I would literally sit after work in my cubicle at this place that was not my house, right? So I would work 9 to 6 because there was a lunch break, and then I would stay there from 6 to 7 or 8 or even beyond sometimes studying Python to gain skills to go to a new career. And I knew if I went home, I'd get too lazy. TV and whatever is on, so like I would stay in my desk and try to learn this stuff. I was doing that for months. So I was putting lots of hours in that way. And I knew at the time, I was like, okay, even if I'm working hard, I'm only getting a couple hours a day, right? Like if I'm working full time, I'll get a week's worth of work in one day just doing that 8 hours a day. So I knew I had to get a job at all costs. And so I studied enough to make that transition, even though I think that company took a risk on me because I wasn't all that experienced. I could do some simple programming things, but I didn't understand environment setup or anything like that at all. But to your point, Brian, like your fear of like, oh, I know this technology, I got to bone up on this other thing. Well, I had only Python experience really, and I went to a PHP job, and the skills did somewhat transfer over, and I learned a bunch there, and I learned on the fly. And then I've transitioned now to my own company. I don't do a lot of PHP anymore. I do mostly Go, right, in Svelte on the front end. It's a JavaScript framework. So the programming skills transfer, I wouldn't worry overly. Of course, always bone up on skills and learn new things and get exposure. That's always great. But I wouldn't be like, oh, I don't know Python. It's like, well, if you know how to program and you're a senior level programmer, it's just syntax. It doesn't really matter. It's going to be a super easy transition. I wouldn't even worry about applying to places that use languages that you don't know. Actually, I just got dinner a couple months ago with a friend of mine that worked at a company. There, he was doing Ruby on Rails. Now he does Go at a different company. He didn't have any Go experience going in. He just got hired at this place, not knowing us. He never written a line of Go or looked at it. I don't think it really matters as long as you have the construction in your mind. And the last thing I'll just say is my transition from I went from my non-technical role to that agency where I was doing technical stuff day in and day out, and then I started my own company. But it was largely there were several things going on. Like on the one hand, I think I saw my career path there, and I'm always more ambitious than the trajectory I'm on. And I wanted to be the owners of the company. Like I really respected them a lot. And I wanted to be them instead of where I saw myself going if I continued on the path. But also there's a lot of things going on in my personal life. My mom was sick at the time. So I was moving back home to be with her regardless. So it's like you're saying, Brian, sometimes your life just dictates the circumstances and what you have to do for that reason. So it's not always like purely a decision of, oh, I'm going to cut the cord here and do this thing. Mine was largely dictated by things that were just happening in my life at the time.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah. Well, I hope what you're saying is true in terms of all the skill sets for learning Python and whatnot, because that is something that I've been one of my fears, and I'm sure many people out there as well, is the fear of not having any leash whenever you get moved into a new job, because there's going to be some transition period for whenever you go to a new place. Jay, whenever you moved to your first AWS job, you said you did have a decent leash to learn, or were you expected to go in and do something right away?
Um,
Little both.
my very first cloud gig with one of the big four companies was probably the worst cloud role that I've had. Jim mentioned before, working for these big companies, like so yeah. Let me just lay down a timeline for you about how my first like 6 months went there. So the day I started, I was supposed to get my laptop sent to me because this happened during COVID, right? So over here, we were all locked down. There was no in-office stuff or anything like that. They sent me a laptop via a courier service. That laptop arrived at 10 a.m. ish, and it came without a charger. So I turned it on. It had 30% battery life. I got through as much as the intro stuff that I could get through, including submitting a ticket to IT and being like, hey, guys, you sent this without a charger, and now I'm going to miss like my whole week's worth of stuff. Bye. And my computer shuts down. So basically, I got paid for free for that first week because it took them a week until Friday to get me my computer charger. And then there was not a lot of coaching going on at this place, right? So you're supposed to do an intro week that everybody does, which I missed out on because I didn't have my laptop charger. And then after that, it was literally 6 weeks of me being like, well, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I would reach out to the one director who I knew, and he's like, oh, yeah, we're looking for something for you, but never telling me like what I should be working on during this whole entire time period. So I literally did nothing for 6 weeks until I finally got put on a project. And because of visa situations and COVID, I hadn't been back to the US for 3.5 years. So I had booked a flight home for December, and I came back for the month of December that year. So from like early November to the first week of December, I was put on a project, but then got taken off of the project, rightfully so, because I was going back to the US and they needed somebody else to work on it. So I've come back. I think I got back here January 8th or something like that. They lined up another project for me to start in a month later. I think it was supposed to start in the beginning of February. A week before the project was supposed to start, it got canceled because another company won the project over the company that I was working for. And then at that point, I'm like, well, I need to get like some sort of certification during this time period or something like that to justify the reason like that they have me on staff, because like I've literally done nothing. I've done 3 weeks of work for this company and I've been employed here for 5 months. You know what I mean? Like I need to figure something out. So that's when I ended up getting my solutions architects associate for AWS. And I just kept on complaining to leadership before they got me put into another group. But yeah, I basically did no work for the first 7 months that I worked there. And that
Jay,
was
I
my
remember
first gig in
talking.
cloud.
This is some context for the viewers. I actually remember talking to you a lot during that period. It's funny. So on the outside, Jay just got this amazing cloud role. I think it was your first cloud role, right? And like you got a huge pay bump and all these things that were going awesome. And you think like, okay, and then he doesn't even have to do anything on top of it. He must just be the happiest person ever. I remember you were miserable. You're like, give me a project, let me work, let me feel valuable. Like you were not happy getting paid this monster salary with a great title for doing no work. Like I feel like doing the work and feeling accomplished would have been more important to you than all those other things.
It was honestly the most stressed out I've ever been because I'm like, here I am making more money than I've ever made with a job title that I never thought that I would necessarily be able to get. And like, nobody is over here telling me or giving me any work, telling me what I should be doing every day.
It's funny at the time, Jay, when you first were talking about that, I remember like in my head, I'm like, oh, like I don't even know, like sounds pretty good to like not have to do anything because I
Yeah.
was really stressed with some projects that I was trying to do. But then I thought about it. It's like, when am I the most unhappy in what I'm doing? It's when I feel like I'm not aligned with my client, or like the work I'm doing is not having an impact, or they're suggesting that I do things that I think are bad practices. So I feel like we're making a negative impact on their web properties. Those are the periods when I'm the least happy. And it's not about the revenue. It's not about
hmm
how many hours I'm putting in. It's just like, do I feel like I'm being useful? Do I feel like my existence in this world has a purpose? And I
Yeah.
think that's just like a huge part of job satisfaction.
100%.
There's so many great clips about consulting. Like there's Steve Jobs has a great speech. He's at like it looks like he's at some college or something like that. And he's like
hmm
asking what people are doing, like who's in manufacturing, who's whatever. And then he's like, what's everyone in? And they're all like consulting, and he goes on a nice little rant. It's pretty
Yeah.
funny. DHH from 37 Signals, the Basecamp guy, is like, he has some good rants on it too. Worth checking out for the viewers.
It's just really sad because over this last week, right? So like I was obviously let go from my contract position. Well, not, I guess let go is the wrong terminology, but they didn't decide to continue my or extend my contract once it expired. And apparently more people have been let go since I've been gone from their cloud position. And like their cloud practice is really struggling at the moment. And it's just too bad.
Yeah, I have a big consulting firms in general. Oh my God. Have you ever seen like the video clips that they put together where like all the people, like they interview people, these things, they all just talk exactly the same. It's just like all BS. Anyways,
Mhm.
Brian, don't work at a big consulting company. They're just like
Yeah, don't do that.
such a sad, stupid experience. I'm sorry. Anyone who's listening, working there, you should
Yeah,
feel bad
get
about
out.
yourself. No, I'm just kidding. No,
Yeah.
I'm
Leave and
just
start
messing.
your own business.
You also, like, those employees probably make like 5 times as much as I do. Those salaries are crazy. Also, I just want to clarify.
Mm.
I think I gave credit to DHH. I think it's his business partner, Jason Fried, that I'm actually thinking of the quote. I know we're going along here. I had some questions for you, Brian. I don't know how much you want to get into like your interests and that kind of stuff. But I'm just like curious. Have you thought about things like preferable company size, or like have you explored technologies, or if not, like what interests you in a technology? So for me, it's like bare minimum simplicity. Like I love brutalist technology that's really ugly and non-expressive, that just like works consistently. Like there's like I strive for those type of technologies and look for those. Have you thought at all of these type of things? Like you like, it seems like you work a lot in systems language, like really low level memory managed like languages. Is that like where you like to be? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Have you started like thinking
So,
about these things?
I have lots of experience with memory management and all those type of things. I've done migrations for upgrading from one set of software to the next, and like preparing the database to be able to handle our new system. And then I've also done a lot of front end work with building screens and all those things. So I don't know where I want to be in all those. I like both of them a lot. So I don't know if I have to choose, but I don't know. And in terms of, so I think one thing that I want to do is I want to transition out into at least the same field, because like what Jason was saying before is use your skill sets that you have. And I've worked in medical software for 14 years. So I might as well try to do something with that skill set, since I can't take along my programming language. Might as well take that skill set along with me. Obviously, the logic behind all the programming and everything else will come with me as well. But I guess that's my mindset currently, is I will take front end stuff, back end stuff. I like both of them. It's fun being uh, creative and finding the solution that fits the best for both. But I think transition isn't necessarily the right word, but going into the same field, I think is what I'm currently looking at. But we'll have to see. Does that answer your
Yeah,
questions?
I was gonna say that makes a lot of sense as far as I'm concerned. Like, if you're looking to transition out of where you are right now, you need to leverage something that you have already. You can't just start fresh completely all over it. You can, but ideally, like, that's not what you want to do. So I think it makes a lot of sense for you to, like, if I were you, what I would be doing is I would be trying to pivot in the same industry, just using a different language. And then from there, once you get used to using whatever language that is, then maybe you can use that language to pivot to a different industry. Like, you don't want to be, if you
Sure.
don't want to be
Yeah.
staying there. So that's from somebody who's done it before. Like, that's what I would be like considering over like maybe like a 5-year period, learning a new language upfront. And then, like, for the next 0 to 6 months, being able to transition from that to a new company in the same industry using a new language that you haven't used before, stay there for a couple of years. And then if there's another industry that you think you can make more money or would make you happier, then moving to there with the new language that you've learned. So yeah, that makes complete sense to me.
Cool.
Up
I
to
100%
off on the
agree.
right foot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Jay. Like, I feel like life is just in general, life is about leverage. Like, what
Yeah.
levers can you pull to get things done? And that could be something as simple as, Brian, maybe you go on an interview and you get a sense that the manager who's interviewing you is like frustrated that their dev team is like off task and they can't like, maybe it's a failure that they're a bad manager, but maybe your lever is, hey, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to be enthusiastic, and I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to listen to your direction. And like, that might be enough to be like, oh, maybe I can like use this guy to lead this team in a good direction. Like, that's just a silly example, but like, levers are all over the place. You just have to figure out which ones need pulling, right? Like, oh, I'm a senior medical like software developer. That's a lever, right? Oh, I do a lot of systems things. I haven't done C, but I've done a lot of this. There's another one. So, I mean,
Well,
you'll be fine.
honestly, Brian's got one of the biggest advantages I've ever seen for
I
somebody
thought you were gonna say
trying
one of the biggest
to find
levers.
it. Yeah, I said it. And now, and that would be
The
the
audience
fact
gets
that,
a small view of what we
yeah,
actually are in life. But yes,
yeah,
okay, continue. Jay.
yeah. And that would be, not many people our age have 14 years with one company, right? So, like, you're not willy nilly moving companies
Oh
just
yeah.
because like something hasn't gone right. Like I have, for example, as justified as all of the moves that I have made are, like, a lot of people see these as like I've literally sat on interviews having to talk people through each and every move that I've made and telling them why I've had to make these moves. And some of them have been like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And some of them have been like, oh, well, that seems like shady to us. And I'm like, well,
They said that to you?
oh, 100%. Like you
Oh, I
seem to,
figured they'd do it behind closed doors.
no,
Yeah.
I've had people say, you seem to have an answer for everything. And I'm like, yeah, cause it's the truth. Like, I'm not sure
Also, it's
what
an
it is
interview.
that you're
Like,
looking for. Yeah. You will
you ask
be
me questions
shocked.
and I answer them.
Yeah, you will be shocked at the amount of bad interviewers that there are out there.
Oh.
And I'll say that for anybody looking for an interview where it's either a career transition or just somebody looking for a different job in the same space that they're in right now. Um, Interviews are often dictated by how good the person conducting the interview is at conducting the interview. And I've had experience with this on both sides. So I've interviewed a lot for roles, and I've also interviewed a lot of people for roles. And honestly, sometimes if you don't get a job, it's down to how bad the person on the other side of the interview is. So yeah, don't take it too seriously, because a lot of people out there really suck at interviewing people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I would almost rather somebody is rude to my face than like thinking things are going well and they're just like discounting you behind the scenes. Like that's annoying, but I'd almost rather that than to be like, oh, I think I got this job. I had one when I was fresh out of college. I had this one place. I can't remember. Actually, I do remember the name. I won't say it though. I just thought I went to like 3 rounds of interviews. I thought I like home run. And then like I had this other job that I actually ended up taking like in my back pocket. I was like really waiting to hear from this. And I just never heard from them. It was crazy.
Mhm.
Like I thought they like absolutely loved me. And I never heard a single, and I still to this day never heard a response from them. So I was just like, oh, I don't
Yeah.
know. But I waited. I was like pushing off the other company for like a week to be like to see.
Yeah, I'll chip in on this one just because last year when I was looking for a role, there was a company that I came across that like lights up the board when you're talking about like good reviews on say Glassdoor or something like that. You get like a 4.5 from their ex-employees or whatever. And this company had me do 6 45-minute interviews, all individual people. One was a phone call, 3 were like a Zoom or Teams meeting, and 2 of them were in person. And I went through all of them, and I ended up getting an offer from another company before I got anything from them. So I texted the recruiter that I was working with over there, and I said, "Hey, just letting you know, I'm annoyed with the way this interview process has gone. Like, you've needed 6 interviews. A lot of people have asked me the same questions over and over again. I got an offer today, so I'm going to accept this offer." And the recruiter comes back 20 minutes later saying, "Oh, hey, sorry, we weren't going to extend the offer to you anyway. Sorry about that. But in the future, if you want to work with us again, let me know." And I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I will never recommend you to anybody ever because of the way that you treated me. Like, you not only did you make me go into your office twice, but you made me do six interviews in total. Like, absolutely ridiculous for somebody who's trying to get just like a cloud engineering position. So yeah, I would advise
And
anybody looking for a role, be very careful about places that make you interview that many times, because that place was 6 and I said no to them. And the place that I've worked at that was the best so far, at least over here in Australia, it was 1 half-hour interview and they didn't even ask for any references or anything like that. So yeah.
Yeah. And just
Yeah.
circling back around, I do think, Brian, that the loyalty thing is huge, like especially for certain companies, that's like probably bigger than anything else you can put. Like, so like having that is like a thing that almost nobody has, right? Like a 14-year
Yeah,
like
no one.
loyalty to a company, man. So that's cool.
any other questions for me? I have a couple more. I know we're up to an hour now. So any other ones that either you had for me?
I don't have any questions for you. No.
You did preparation, Brian. So why don't we do your questions and
Yeah, Mike.
A couple other ones. I'll just do one more or 2 more. And then let's see. All right. So we touched on this, but during the interview process, what did you think matters the most? This last one. So my last question is, seeing that the whole premise of this podcast was I was the one that we all have different career paths, and I'm the guy with
this
on
the
the
last
same
episode?
company. Yeah, is
Yeah,
this it for me?
100%.
Am I gone? Okay.
Yep. Podcast is over. Thanks, Brian.
Sure.
That's hilarious. Is that actually the question? Is the
Yeah,
podcast
yeah.
over?
Am I fired? Basically, am I fired from here? Or
Well, I don't think a podcast with 2 people with 2 different perspectives. I think the trifecta is what makes it. So I think we're just done. It was a good run while it lasted.
yeah.
Come on, Brian. You obviously have like a real question to ask. No, come on.
That's a good
That's it.
question. That's funny. We're at exactly an hour mark here. I think it's probably a
Yeah.
good cut.
All right. So this was
I did like your original question though, which is why like I want to circle back to it.
all right.
Circle back to it. Let's do it.
What's like the most important thing to like signal to an interviewer or something like that?
Yeah. All right. So I'll
that's a
ask you
really good question, man. Yeah.
during the interview process, what do you think matters the most, or what do you feel is the most important thing to convey during the interview? Was what I was saying.
Okay. Jim, me or you?
I feel like you have something more profound, so I'll say mine first, so we can end on you, Jay. So my personal opinion, like I really think that your enthusiasm for like the company, its mission, its customers, what they're doing, like really matters a lot. So that means like asking great questions, being more concerned. Like if you go in there and you ask, and the people do all the time, because I do a lot of interviews. I've done it for my company and other companies. They'll be like, "What's like the vacation? Like, what's the pay?" Like they're just like it's all me questions, and it's the biggest turnoff. Like they honestly they go like in the instant no category in my mind. If you actually are like, "Hey, it looks like you guys were releasing this new product. How does that fit in the market here?" If you ask questions like that, dude, you're gonna blow their tits off so hard that they will hire you. I really believe that. And I don't think that I think it's overrated, like being technical. So like going and like whiteboarding really well or being like, I did this or I did that. Like, I don't think people really care that much. Being like a nice guy that they can sit down and work with, like, oh, I could like work with this guy for 8 hours and he's not gonna be super weird. And also he cares about what we're doing. I feel like that's 98% of what you need, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And almost nobody does it. That's the crazy thing. Like almost nobody like gives a crap at all. They don't customize a cover letter. They don't like show any interest in knowing what the company does or how they do it or why they do it or like how they could be beneficial. Like they don't do any of that. It's crazy.
Okay. All right. I like it.
In my opinion, because a lot of my interviews are highly technical, I think being able to ask reasonable questions about something that you don't necessarily know the answer to is very telling about how much you actually know about technology. So, for example, someone was like, in one of the interviews that I've had was, say somebody wants you to set up an RDS instance in AWS, like how would you do it? And I've never set up an RDS instance in AWS, so I really don't know how to answer that question. But what do I ask them? I'm like, well, like what is most concerning to you? Like how highly available do you need it? How secure do you need this database? How often do you need backups taken? Like if you know enough about something, enough to ask questions to make it to show that you know a lot about something, even though like if you've never done it before, you can demonstrate your skills and your thought process and everything like that shows somebody that even though you might not have an answer for them, that like, you know, what at least you should be considering and what you should be researching and stuff like that. So I think honestly, the most important thing during an interview is showing somebody that you know how to find an answer as opposed to knowing what the answer is. And obviously knowing the answer is important. So if you know the answer, tell them the answer. But if you don't know the answer, you need to be able to convey the fact that you can get there eventually without actually needing somebody else to get there. So yeah, Jim's right. But yeah, I also
I feel
think
like they call that Socratic questioning, right? Like digging deep in. And I feel like what you're really doing there is you're giving insight into how you think, and that's super powerful. So like,
yeah,
this is a big mistake people do with whiteboarding stuff too, is they sit there and they silently hem and haw and they like try things and it doesn't work. Just, you need to explain what you're thinking and why you're trying things and like the edge cases that can come around from doing it. And so you basically want to talk out loud your process. And I think
mhm.
that's another thing people get nervous, which is understandable,
Mm.
especially if you're junior. It's really hard to go out for the first time and talk technically with people that you're unfamiliar with, but it's good practice.
Mhm.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate all your insight. And I hope this was helpful for anyone else out there thinking about making career change or just moving companies or any of those fun things. So thank you for joining us and hope to see you in the next one.